Janbask training. Learn and grow.
So the BA training session 2. So today we will be talking about Waterfall model, Agile model. We'll be talking about RAD spiral and the RUP model. So we'll be talking about all these models today in the BA test sessions. So waterfall means how the water falls from a fall. One by one, you will be seeing different ladders, and one by one, starting from requirement, the water falls till the maintenance level. So what is exactly it is? It's this linear sequential life cycle model, which is called as waterfall model, which IT industry is using out from past, like starting of the organizations of the IT world in the world, something around late till like 2008 2010, when agile comes in picture. Nowadays agile is among the top, but it doesn't mean waterfall is out of the box. Waterfall is still being used, and but it totally depends upon what kind of a project you are. So first of all, when we are talking about models, what do you mean by that models? So being as a BA now, you will be working in one of the models where you will be doing with development, getting requirements from the client. Then you are based upon that, you will be making some designs. Then you get finalized using with a whole lot of team around how we're going to implement that. What is the requirements that's coming in? Can we even implement? Can we can't implement? All those sort of questions will even come in picture, right? What all the different tests that we have to, what all, how we're going to make the deployments, what all the maintenance activities that we have to go through. So any one model we have to choose in order to go with all these steps. The steps remain same in all these models, but the way of doing things is a bit different. If I talk about V model, if I talk about Agile, if I talk about Waterfall model. So in short, you can understand these models are a way of doing things. How we need to get it done, that I'm gonna help you out understand. But these are models by which you will get your work being done. When you will be getting some requirements coming in from client, how you gonna document them, how you gonna interact with clients and get the requirements, how way to put down your requirements, what all the different implications are, what are tests, how you going to do that. So all sort of different questions we're going to discuss in waterfall model. So moving with the first model called waterfall, as the word suggests, water falling from the fall. So we have first phase as requirement, second as design, third as implementation, fourth as test, fifth as deployment, and sixth as maintenance. So the requirements defines the needs of the requirements or the behavior or from the system interfaces. Now the requirements always comes from the user or like the client. The client comes up, we interact with them, ask for their information around how you want to get your work being done. What is the behavior? Then we move on to the design part, data structures. What is the software architecture? Interface, representations comes under the design part. Moving on to the next, once we have the requirement, we have the design. We will be talking about what will be the data structures, how the backend gonna look like, what will be the interfaces, how the algo is going to take a look at, right? All those set of steps will come in design path. So that's step 2 of waterfall. The step 3 says, hey, when we have finalized the requirements, when we have finalized the design, let's talk about how we're going to implement that. When I'm saying by design, it's clearly articulated that software architecture, interfaces, and representations that makes flowcharts, BPM and diagrams, balsamic diagrams, and flow into use case diagrams are all being done by the BA. Okay, screen interfaces, right? How the UI gonna look like? How is gonna be my dashboard? What all the pictures will be there on that? So all sort of design being developed by the BAs itself. Data architecture that goes to the development team. They prepares their data architecture structures and they're gonna send it across back to the whole team, the panel of a group, that hey, this is gonna be look like if the UI gonna be like that, where the value is gonna be saved, what all the tables will be there, what is gonna be the master table, how we're gonna initiate the procs, and all those things will come from the design part. Okay, so requirement we talked about, design we talked about. Now once we have finalized what all will be the requirements, what the client's going to have in design, based upon that the requirements, we have made some flowcharts, interfaces, balsamics, and other mockups. We decided upon now the design part. Even let's now talk about the implementation part, how we want now this requirement and design to be implemented using the documents and testing. So in the implementation phase, we talked about the source codes, what will be our data, what is going to be the user documents, and how we're going to talk about the testing part. So there's the implementation phase, QAs are involved and they start looking into the design and implementation part. Parallelly, next comes with the test where they check the code different modules, validate that whether it's behaving as specific, They start creating out their test plans. How, with the test plan, they're going to validate how the functionality works in. Is it working fine or not? Moving on to the step 5 is deployment, where we're going to validate whether whatever we designed, we completed, it's even deployed well. If there are any issues, right? Is working as expected as per the requirement document. Step 5 clearly articulates that everything is done. And in the step 6, we will be talking about the maintenance part, where if we identify any issues during these 5 steps, we'll be talking about those. And in the maintenance, we'll be fixing those bugs. Okay, so now you must have seen we have taken a considerable amount of steps, starting from requirements, then designing, implementation, test, then deployment, and then maintenance. So you've seen requirement itself. Now, what I'm just telling you out of the box information as advantages and disadvantages are requirement itself takes around 2.5 to 3 months. Usually for a like a routine project of like 1 year or close to like 9-10 months, it takes around 2 months or 1.5 for 2 months. For design, we another take like 15-20 days, then implementation 30 days, then test again it takes like 30 days. So coming on to this phase, we have already like consumed around 4 months of time. Then we actually moved on to the deployment part. So we have this, it's like consumed 4 months, and then we went into deployment and finally maintenance. So the complete step, if you want to complete a project, it takes around 8 to 10 months to complete a project using the waterfall model. Now, why that happens? See, now in each step, you have dependency or the first one. Requirements, design, it can't be done without requirements are there. Implementation can't be done just because we don't have finalized designs. Test can't be done just because we have implementation not yet been finalized. And we have very specific persons on each steps. So designer can't do what the requirement can do. Implementation person can't do what his tester is doing in. So this is how the problem statement comes in picture. So what all the advantages of a model are? The model is simple and easy to understand. That's first thing, because we have different steps and everybody can understand under which bucket what falls in. Second, it is easy to manage due to rigidity of the model. Each phase specific delivers a review process. In this model, phases are processed and complete on a time. Phases are not overlapped. Waterfall model works well for smaller projects where requirements are very well understood. So whenever we are working on a smaller projects, waterfall models are very clearly articulated the steps and we can understand it easily. But what are all the disadvantages of waterfall? No working software is produced late till the middle of the cycle. I'm talking about the same. So if you talk about the working model is still not been produced till the fourth step. And the fifth, we came to know something that hey, something is being developed, how it's going to look like, or how it's going to be delivered. High amount of risk is involved. Not a good model for a complex projects. Poor model for long and ongoing projects. Now, how the risk is involved? Let me tell you. In this model, suppose you have gathered all the requirement and you are there on the fourth step. Based upon the requirement, only you moved on to the fourth step. Later, when you're interacting with the client, even you have the sign-offs on the requirement. I'm not saying you don't have the sign-offs. Something went wrong on the requirement part, or a BA itself had made some mistakes on the requirement. So on the fourth step, whatever you are doing in, that will all be wrong. So you will be landing up into some issues saying that, hey, we are facing some issues just because the requirements are wrong. Or the client comes in picture and says, can you guys let me know because you guys have spent 4 months, where is the progress? Where we are on it? So the problem or the issue that we faced in step 1 is being analyzed in step 4. So you must have seen this requirement phase only. We should have find that problem, but we actually find it up during the implementation phase. So you must have seen there are two major disadvantages here. First, time consuming because we have taken 4 months and after that we came to know. Second, a lot of cost is involved now because requirement gathering itself, like 4 people have put down their 2 months of time and they've even been given salaries and everything. We have charged clients as well. So cost is even involved. So just to verify what happened in spread 4, we have to wait till like step 4 and 5 to be there in picture to understand that. So that's why it's been said that a waterfall model is a time consuming process. A lot of dependencies are there and it's not a cost effective solutions as well. So now when we are talking about waterfall, I want to add another one point. That doesn't mean that we have stopped using waterfall now, right? But the thing about it is we are only using in cases where the requirements are very clear, crisp, or in the past we have done or we have a prior experience. or in the projects which are very straightforward. We have to develop something. We have a docs in place. There is no dependencies on other teams or any issues around implementation, legal or anything else. So we can strictly go around like developing those up. Okay, so the model is used only when the requirements are very well known and clear. So we are using then only the waterfall models. Product definition is stable. So the definition of the product is very stable that they really want specific document or a tool or something like that. We're going to talk about it. Technology to be understand. You have a clear understanding of the technology. You worked on that technology in the past. So these are certain, like I'm telling you with certain steps, or you can say certain areas. Based upon that, you can decide like whether we're going to go with waterfall or not. When we have ambiguous requirements, there are no change in the requirements. It's clear and crisp. It's a very simple thing that you have developed in the past, or like it's renowned there in the market and just you are creating a new version of it. Or if the project is very small. In such cases, on all these areas, you can use the waterfall model. Okay, so the next comes in. Before going into any agile, I want to show you one picture. This is a very important picture, and you anybody or one or the other have always seen this picture. Did anyone here have seen this picture? Looks like very stupid and ugly, or like you can say a very simple thing. But have you ever seen this picture anywhere? So now being as a BA, as I mentioned, one of the important steps for each BA is to gather requirements when they're interacting with a client. So all in such cases, now you need to, what's the major mistake that a BA makes or failures of the BA if I talk about, the major failure comes in requirement gathering. And that leads to project failures as well in the past. We have led into a lot of failures in the past, and that is one of the incident that keeps on happening in BA's life. That we always end up into either wrong understanding or we either end up into not understanding what the client wants, or situation arises that we understand what the client wants but we can't document it out right and what he exactly needs it, or what he exactly needs it, what all the different innovation he's bringing up to the existing system. We're not able to understand that, and these pictures shows about what the requirement the client is looking out for and what we understand. This picture, if you will be having any smart interviewers, they're going to have these pictures for you always. They're going to make some scenario change in this. They're going to make some module changes in this. But these kinds of questions comes in interview as well. If you're especially targeting for a BA roles in like Google or like Facebook or like McGraw Hills, especially these companies go with such diagrams definitely for a BA. Only they're going to change some scenarios, but they're going to come up with such questions like that. Because one of the important responsibilities of a BA is to gather requirement or elicit requirements. And around 80% of them either fails in that or they can't explain the things as it's been required by the client. So now let's talk about this picture, what that means. So you're seeing a tree there, right? And attached to it, there is a seesaw. It's there, right? Now this picture is like a tree and a saw is there on it, and it's there, and they have three ladders attached to it. This is what customer explained it. He explained that there's going to be a tree. I want to get this developed. I want these two rows and three ladders on it. And this is how it's going to look like. That's something the customer explained to you. Now, there are other peoples with you, like BAs and other. The project leaders understand that they want a ladder needs to be there and it needs to be there on the tree, right? You created this picture in your mindset or probably on your UI or anything like that, right? And this is how your designer understands it. And you must be saying, hey, Dan, how it's going to happen? Because you're involved over here. You created some documents based upon requirement documents. You created the documents. Your designer is not involved in that meetings, right? You created this document, but the designer understands it and he created like this. It's like innovative. So he guys put it up in the air, half of the tree in air and the rest of the at the bottom of it. It's done his innovation top part. Right. When now the designer written these documents, explained up this up, it goes next to the programmer who programs the system. So see, now he has laid down the seesaw on the like the floor and tied the knots to the tree. How the patches were being done. You must be seeing like patches means any bugs that's been found out, right? They finally did that. They fixed something like that to fix the tree. They removed out all these like supports. They put the like the seesaw on the floor, and this is how it's gonna look like. So you must be seeing now there is a seesaw there on the tree as well, and there is a seesaw there on the floor as well. Now they're two seesaws comes in, whereas earlier what client understand there is only one. And finally at the end product, something looks like a tree is there, a rope is there, but there is a tire tacked to it. So what we explained and what is we developed it finally, there is a huge difference in this. And this is the mistake that a BA does, or a BA can't explain it well in their documents, that leads to all these confusions and problems. By this picture, I want to explain how important your role comes in the picture one. What customer explained and what you changed it totally makes a difference. You made a mistake over here. Suppose nobody revalidates that or everybody agrees on this. And we finally have created our documents and sent it across to the team and they started developing and see. At the last, when we show this picture six to the client, he's gonna be, hey, I'm looking over something like that. How this has been developed. So now see, you have moved out six steps, you have done everything. And at the end of like year or like 10 months or like 2 years, customer says this is not I don't want. I don't want this. This is what not I'm looking out for. Because in the realistic world, you will must be having some pictures, but the exact pictures will not be there because you're creating certain tools, right? So few of you, you guys must be thinking, hey, when the picture is very clear, how we get this developed? This is I'm just telling you from the UI prospect. On those discussions with the client, we are having your all discussions over calls, physical meetings, one-on-one meetings, right? Such kinds of meetings happens. There are some UIs, some brochures are there, but we don't have the realistic image how that's gonna look like because that is something that we have to create it. So based upon our understanding, we created some documents and see what the problem it has made in. Till the last picture, we end up into something making wrong, which is not required by the client. So your step one has clearly wasted the whole team time, and for 2 years we spend our cost, we spend our money, we spend our resources, their time, and at the end we got what? Nothing. Zero. Moving on to the next, we have the Agile model. Agile SDLC model. It's a combination of iterative and incremental product based development model that's focused on adaptability and customer satisfaction by rapid delivery development model of a software. Now, the word says rapid delivery of working software products. So, that is the key over here. So, that means with the rapid delivery, we're gonna create the product. By rapid delivery means every sprint we're gonna develop, we're gonna send it across back to the client and say, hey, this is we did in one sprint one. Can you just review that? Or if there are any feedbacks, let me know. If the feedbacks are positive, that's good. We don't have to do anything. If the feedbacks are nothing or like their feedbacks has some issues or concerns, we're gonna get it done in sprint two. We're gonna get it done in sprint three. And there are further sprints we can get those done. So see, we have not wasted much time. Requirement gathering, we have done it even over here as well. So step will remain there. But identifying that mistake, lowering down the cost is all done under the agile model. So that's why it's called as iterative product based rapid delivery model that we iteratively developed it using iterations. Sprints are even called as iterations as well. So you must be seeing certain times I'm using iterations, sometimes I'm using word sprints. Both means the same. So now let's talk about agile. What is agile? Agile is like one of the incremental product based development model. So when I'm saying incremental means by increasingly we are developing the product. That's first thing. Product based development model, that means in this model we are rapidly developing a product and we are keep on having word with the client and getting their feedbacks on regular basis around how that's been developed, what are their feedbacks, how we want to move forward, are all been taken care over here. So what there in agile, so in the agile model we are going in the format of sprints. Every release we have 3 sprints. So we how we have divided out agile is in agile, whenever we are working in, there are two main concepts. First is release. That means when we officially gonna deliver the product to the customer, right? And how we work in that release, we work in 3 sprints each release. This sprint length will be from 2 to 4 weeks. It's a standard time as per the BEBOK guide. That's for the BA certification and as per the Scrum Master Agile certification as well. It's limited to 2 to 4 weeks. And now that totally depends upon your organization whether they want to go with a 2 week sprint, they want to go with a 3 week sprint, they want to go with a 4 week sprint. But it would not be lower than 2 and it would not be higher than 4. So that depends upon your organization, how they want to move forward. Some go with 2 weeks, some go with 3 weeks, and some follow the regular routine of 4 week sprint. So each sprint gonna work for 4 weeks. So I'm taking in a duration of 4 weeks. So sprint 1 goes for 4 weeks, sprint 2 goes for 4 weeks, sprint 3 goes for 4 weeks, and finally we deliver at the one last, the working product, and that we call it as a release. This is how the agile model works in. It's adaptive, self-organized, self-functional. Now, and this, the team is cross-functional even. In this, it's not been asked that, hey, if the developer is there, he's going to do the development only. Testers, if they are capable enough, they can do that. Secondly, in this model, developers is even been asked to like work on the testing front as well. So that's why we call it as cross-functional team. In Agile, we don't call it like the Scrum team. We don't call it as like we have a complete team. No, we have a cross-functional team or a Scrum team that has cross-functional capability of doing testing, development, both of them, even the UAT. Adaptive planning. So we work on the adaptive planning approach. Time boxed iterative approach. So by time boxer means like within 4 weeks, whatever we have to pick it up, we have to complete it within 4 weeks. So we are time boxed. If you're not able to, it will be spilling over. It will be affecting your matrices. We have burned down charts and everything that reflects that, hey, you're not able to get it done within 4 weeks. There are some issue with the planning or there are something you have not broken down well. So that sort of things comes in picture over here. Then we have rapid and flexibility for adapting the change. Suppose you made some mistake in the sprint 1. So you always have the opportunity to get it corrected out in sprint 2 within 28 days. Right, when I'm saying 4 weeks, so we have 5 weeks, 5 working days in a week. So if you multiply it by 4, because we have 4 weeks, within 20 days you develop something, you show it to the client, we get some feedback coming in that, hey, this is something that needs to be corrected. So we move on to the sprint 2 and get that corrected. So within past 20 days, we get this done. So we have an opportunity of correcting our mistakes in the next. Should you remember in the waterfall, I find out some identification as the last step. Then I again need to go on the step 1, check with the client, get it done, and follow the same 6 steps here. Whereas in Agile, client is involved with us at the step 1 itself. So even if you make any changes in the step 1, sprint 1, in sprint 2, you can get it done. Whereas if you talk about the waterfall, if you have made some mistake over here, by the end of the release, you're gonna get to know what the mistake you have done. And because clients are not involved early there. So what are all the advantages of Agile? Deliver a working product faster, convenient, and easy. Even late changes in the requirements are welcomed. Even if you're making any late changes or the clients comes up, hey, I have some changes. I think now this can be done like that. Those sort of requirement changes can even be adapted. What all the disadvantages are? Some software deliveries, especially the large ones, assets, requires beginning of the software development life cycle. The lack of emphasis is on necessary designing and documentation. So with Agile, one important thing comes in picture. We went into less of documentation and more of implementation part. Whatever we are now doing it, we are doing it as part of the implementation or the design part, right? But we will not be creating like first the documents. We are spending around 3 months in documentation, 2 months in designing and all those things. We are not doing it. So that's why now as a BA role, the documentation have really gone down for a BA. Earlier, we used to create BRDs and FRDs for like 90 days, 100 days. We are just creating a document of like 500 pages, 1000 pages, right? Writing down all gossips in that, all sort of requirements, words, everything, documenting them up. Then the QAs and BAs are reviewing them again, and a whole sort of manual efforts we are getting into. With Agile coming in picture, we are writing them in the form of shorts user stories. And with user stories, we are getting all these things done. So in my future slides, when we'll be talking about Agile, I will be giving you more information around like what are user stories, how we write it up, how we're gonna write it, what's the format looks like, how it's gonna be like there. So all those things will be there. So when to use Agile now? That's the question comes in. When the requirements are not clear. Remember in the waterfall, what we have seen when we're going to use it, when the requirements are clear, simple, short products. Agile when comes in picture when the requirements are not clear. When you have dependencies, when the product is intent to be an industry rapidly changing standards. You must have seen when the product keep on coming up with the changes. Or there are some issues. Or the lack of issues comes in picture. You have multiple dependencies with technologies and other things. When the product needs to be early to go into the markets. When you want your working model to be ready ASAP, they want that to be delivered soon. In such cases, we use the agile model. Okay, so the next comes is V model. So V model is something very specific when we are working on models where the requirement phase are very clear, right? And for each step, we need to do the validation parallelly. Like in the V model, we do verification and validation model also. Both the word says V, verification and validation. That's why we call it as V model. So on each step, there is nothing different from any of the tools, but the only thing here is in every step we need to do the validation as well. We can't move on to the next step without having a validation. So it's like a sequential cycle where we're gonna validate and each phase and complete to the next phase. Starting with planning, we move on to the requirement. At the requirement, we're gonna check whether the system and acceptance testings are done. So that's why seeing a dotted arrow. On every step, we are validating that. Then we're gonna have the architecture diagrams being created, but at the same time, we are even doing the integration testing and validating whether the architecture gonna integrate it with the system. We're gonna have the designing and we are gonna have the unit testing of it as well. We're gonna validate whether the design that we have created and what are the system we had are we have done with the testing, have we validated those steps, check whether all the modules have been accepted. Based upon that, when we're going to make this comparison and did the study, finally we're going to implement that up. And this is how the shape even looks like a V, and this is how we even implement the V. And if there are any corrections or enhancements in this model, we're going to use it out in the first step again. This V model is really not popular in the market, but only uses in cases where you want every step to be validated first before we move on to the next step. These kinds of models are specifically used out in the pharma world, like specifically the healthcare industries or the pharma industries which create medicines, manufacture medicines. They use this model where they want first the planning of the product needs to be there, what they want to create it. Second, they find out the requirements around that medicine, and at the same time they check out for their testing part whether the medicine as mentioned has their benefits is even there or not. They're going to validate once they identify the medicine have their required benefits. Once this step is cleared, then only they're going to move on to the next step. Okay, the medicine scale, let's create its molecules or like its components. Parallelly, we're going to test that out again, whether it's working as expected. Then we're going to have a detailed design, how that going to look like. Then again, we're going to validate. And finally, we're going to implement it as a medicine finally been developed. And with in implementation phase, we're going to test it on certain humans, monkeys, rats. And finally, with this implementation becomes successful, then we move on to the next steps. So it's like case specifically, we use this model. Usually in IT, we hardly use this model. Either Agile and Waterfall is highly being used out. But rarest of the rarest case, like 1% or 2% of the cases, we are using the V model. So what all the advantages of V model are? So it's simple and easy to use. Proactive defect tracking avoids the downward flow of the defects. So in this model, since you're seeing it's going downwards to the whenever the bugs or the defects are coming in, we are finding it up early in the stages. So less of the bugs at the implementation phase. Works well for small projects where the requirements are easily understood. Where the requirements are very clear, easily understood, we use such models under that. Very rigid and least flexible. So that's one of the information out of like in step one, if you're not able to complete it, we can't move to step two. So rigidity is there and flexibility is less. Whereas in agile, we can, if we are not getting it done in sprint one, we can get it done in sprint two. If our step one is not clear, still we can move on to the step two. But in V model, we can't do that really. And the change happens in the midway. The test documents along with requirement documents has to be updated. Any changes or any issues being faced out in the model, we have to get it updated out in the next. And that's something falls under the disadvantage category. When to use V models. So V models should be used out in small to medium sized project where the requirements are clearly defined and fixed. There are no change in the requirements going to happen, right? Once, like in medicine, as I mentioned, right? Once we have completed that a medicine is there and it's had its benefit, now there is no change going to come in. Now the only thing that's going to happen is whether it has its qualities or not, whether it's going to cure the disease or not. That is something that has to be taken a look at. But client again not going to come and say, hey, this is not what I wanted. This is what is fixed. It's there. It's there. It's defined. There are no implications or changes will be there in that. So whereas in the V-shaped model should be chosen for technical resources available needed and technical expertise are needed. Like in that model, we're going to have technical scientists, technical and understanding guys who are going to clearly have the ideas about it. And there is no change in requirements coming in. So then the next comes as rapid application development model. So the rapid application development model is a type of incremental model, a model with components, functions, and developed parallelly with the projects. These are developments are time boxed, delivered when assembled in a working prototypes. So there's nothing special in these documents. It's like similar to the one. It just have requirements, a works phases, requirement planning phase, where the first phase is requirement planning. Then we're going to design and develop, and then we're going to cut over, where the cutover is means the installation of the system, user acceptance testing, and user training. So we have the requirements, we design it, we finally make the production, like where the code and screens and everything is done at the step 3 only, and it's step 4 if we find out any issues, any installations, and the system is being done is cutover phase. We develop that out. So it's like a simple 4-step process that we use for application development model. So there is nothing special in these models, but these models are specially used out for cases when we have a clear cut requirements, when the requirements are very specific, especially when we are creating mobile apps. We use rapid application development model when the apps are really small and it's just for like simply doing 1 or 2 steps process. It's not about going into like deep dive informations, or we don't need to get into multiple things. It's just like a simple process where you want to have a profile, you want to upload some documents, and you are done. That's all. Short and simple processes or apps where we need to create it, we go with a RAD model. So as I mentioned in my step 1, the model which you're going to choose going to depend upon what kind of a project you are working into. So with the RAD model, the advantages are reduced development time because it's simple and 4-step process. It increases the usability, encourages the customer's feedback, and integrated very beginning of the solve the integrated issues. Because it's a small, we're gonna have an app's been developed. The integration is done at the very early phase. So you're gonna develop and show the client the working model. Because of less dependencies, you are able to do that. Talking about the disadvantages, that requires a highly skilled developers and design, because since we have only 4 steps, we want highly skilled developers that can work on testing, that can work on requirements, that can even work around like fixing the issues and doing the integration part as well. Highly dependent models that require the modeling skills, depends upon the strong team individual performances, because since it's a short model and we have 4-step process, most of the stuff needs to be done by cross functional team, and one has to even have to do the testing, the development, and the UAT parallelly. So the is the cheapest project, cost of the modeling and the very high, just because of the same reason, because we have limited resources, projects are slow, so the cost goes high in these cases. When to use the RAD models is when the requirements are not fully understood, not very clear. RAD should be used only for systems that can be modularized in the manner of incremental manner. It should be used for high availability of design and modelings, where the availability of the designs are high, when we have the modeling skills there in that. It should be used only if the budget permits use of automated codes and generating tools. Now, since I mentioned it's a 4-step project, we are more into using automated tools to consume less time to get it delivered ASAP, where the models and the designings are clear. Because there is no change in requirements going to happen because it's fixed. We're going to use automated tools to get it developed because there is no chance that the requirement we're going to getting change. Although these models are looks to be like similar one or the other way, but the only difference comes in like under watch approach we're going to use the which one. So the next comes a spiral model. The spiral model combines the ideas of iterative development and systematically with the systematic controlled aspects of the waterfall models. So it has the idea of iterative development waterfall models, combination of iterative development process models, sequential linear development model, software that passes through the phases of an iteration cycles. So under this model, we're going to have 4 phases. So the first is planning phase, right? We plan something, then we have risk involved, then we have engineering that needs to be done or certain prototypes, and then we finally evaluate how that's going to be taken care of. So in this model, we're going to have determines of what all the objectives are there. So we start with some objectives. We evaluate the identify the prototypes, what all the different risks that would be there in that. So you must have seen these are the characteristics of a waterfall. Then we evaluate the concept developed in the next product. What all the design requirements are there? We are doing that in step 3. So you have seen in the waterfall, we are doing it at the step 1. When we have requirements, then we are designing. Whereas in the spiral model, we are doing it at step 3, where we're talking about the concepts, requirement, design, and implementation. And finally, we move on to the step 4, plan next release. So whatever we are not able to get it done, we reevaluate the situation and get it done in the next week. That's the step 4. So it's simple, like these kinds of models are strong approval models and documentations, additional models that's used out for software life cycles, highly recommended models, additional functionality that needs to be later dates. Such kinds of advantages are there. The risk involved here is high just because we are avoiding risk at the first step. We're evaluating design at step 3, right? So these are kind of the risks that's been involved. It can be more costly model comparing to other because we are analyzing the risk at step 3. Projects is successfully or highly dependent upon risk analysis phase. What does the kind of risk that is involved? How we're going to handle that? That's all been done under such cases and does not well for a smaller projects. So we need to make sure the smaller projects will not be falling under the bracket of spiral. So we need to make sure we are not using the smaller models when we are working on the spiral. In what cases we are using the spiral models? We're using when cost and risk evaluation is important. For medium to high risk projects, requires are complex. When the requirements are complex, we're going to use the spiral world. New product lines, when we're creating something new on the product lines, user needs are there that are unsure or that are unclear. In such cases, we'll be using the spiral models. So now the next model comes as rapid rational unified model, or we call it as RUP. So RUP model is an iterative software development model. It's object oriented approach that's been used out by the project management for high quality software productions. So in this model, we have basically 4 phases. So one is inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. So if you see this diagram, you must be seeing there are 4 phases been there. And in each phase, we find out what all the inception, what all the business modelings and the requirements will be there. What is the code or the idea envisioned? How it's been elaboration? What all the use cases and the architecture or the diagrams are there? How the construction of the activities looks like? How the design is completed? Transitions follow the activities to ensure the customer satisfaction. How the transition of it is happening in, how the flow of the activities is to ensure the satisfaction of the customers. So what we do is we analyze the phases of the requirements, and in each phase we are talking about the response even coming in. The requirements remains the same, but how we evaluate with the help of use cases, architectures are designed. So instead of designing, we are creating the use cases over here. With the help of the use cases, we are creating the design architectures. That okay, if this gonna use case gonna happen in this project, we're gonna have an architecture like this. This is how we're gonna implement and design. This is how we're gonna transition them, and this is how we use the RUP model. When to use RP model? Recommended for large or long-term enterprises project where the complexity is like high to medium complexity is there. So that's projects can't be used out for very low models. It's been only been used out for the highly recommended long-term models that goes for like 5-10 years, where you need to make sure whatever you are developing at the same time you're getting a feedbacks from the customer as well. What all the advantages of these models are? It's more or emphasizing on addressing risk. It's more based upon like customer feedbacks and their feedbacks approaches coming in picture. Allows requirements to project evolves. It does not either a strong focus on documents and ceremonies. Main focus remains the software product itself and the quality of it. What all the disadvantages are? The team member needs to be expert in the fields or software methodology. Development process is too complex and disorganized. Since, as I mentioned, that we're gonna only have use cases first and designing later, it's disorganized process. Some clients even don't understand this process or sometimes get confused that why we are having use cases first and design at the later phase. But because it's user specific model, so we're gonna have use cases first and design at the later. So it sometimes even helps provide an unclear implementation guidelines. So it fails to help you clear with what the requirements are. So it's a confusing model, but it's like most of them don't recommend to use this because it's really unclear and we implementation is even very not very as expected. So usually it becomes highly difficult to understand this model, but it's used out where the complexity of the projects are even high, where we really want projects to be looked out from an angle of like 5-10 years, where we are not clear, and every time we're going to develop something, put it up in the market, getting it feedbacks from the client, they're going to use it and they're going to provide the feedback, and again we're going to get into it. It's more of a like an innovation part. We are innovating or we are developing something new and we want regular feedbacks. So in such types of cases we are using such these. So that's all we have for today. In the next, we'll be talking around the different charts, the Reiki charts, what all personas are there, what all the managing interface stakeholders are there, what all the different onion diagrams are there, how we're going to identify the stakeholders. We'll be talking around the same in the next class.
Janbask training. Learn and grow.